Welcome to the Sanctuary Podcast. Angel Deer is a medicine man and offers his work on sacred land through shamanic healing, energy healing, sound healing, breath work, plant medicine, and workshops and events. The Sanctuary is a community for all those who seek healing, transformation, ancient wisdom, and a place to come together to create a new way of living and relating. This is the Sanctuary Podcast, and this is Angel Deer.
Welcome back to the Mystical Positivist. I'm your host, Stuart Goodnick, joined by co-host Rob Schmidt, director of Tayu Meditation Center and founder with myself and Jim Wilson of Many Rivers Books and Tea in Sebastopol, California. This week on the show, we converse by telephone with Shawinigan Ungaya, a.k.a. Guillaume Gautreau, founder and director of the Sanctuary Healing Center in the Catskill Mountains, where he offers various forms of healing modalities, including shamanic energy and sound healing, plus plant and herb therapies, as well as an awakened leadership course. So, Guillaume, welcome back. And we were just starting to get into, towards the end of the last hour, the considerable work that you're doing around shamanism. I'm wondering if you could start by just, for our listeners who may not be as familiar or have different ideas about the shamanic path and shamanic training, if you could just describe shamanism as you understand and practice it.
Well, it's probably, one of the oldest spiritual practices on the planet. Some of the
it's
tribes.
Not the oldest.
Yes, it's the oldest. Yeah, because some of the, if you look at Aborigines in Australia, some of their stories are, they're around 50,000-year-old stories.
Yeah.
The Bushmen in Africa, or the Native American are a bit more recent in North America, for what we know for now. Or South America, some tribes are been here for 10, 20,000 years. And it's a path, or it's a spiritual, I would say, just way of living, way of being that's directly connected to nature. Being because of the understanding that we are part of nature. We are nature. We're just one of the species that is out there. And so we are ruled by the same mechanism that is a tree or a river or a mountain. The only difference that we have this big frontal cortex that give us a lot of thinking time, but also a lot of responsibility, on how we are to be in the world. But it's a path of direct revelation too. There is no really teachers out there aside from nature and the plants teachers and the different teachers that are out there. But there is not like a master or guru, or even the word shaman, it comes from Russia. It's not a word you would hear in South America or in North America. We talk about medicine man, medicine woman. So it's people that carry medicine, but we all, in our way of talking, we all carry our own medicine, which is our own gift. Our own, it could be our voice, it could be some other gift we have, and that's our medicine. And our medicine is here to heal the world. It's medicine. So it's here for healing others, for healing, our tribe, our collective, our families, our planet. And so it's beautiful because very often I meet people, that are, Jewish or Christians or Buddhists, but they all, still do work with tribes and do work with sometimes with plant medicine and all of that. And it doesn't really interfere at all with their practice. In fact, it can support a lot their meditation practice, or it can support a lot their own self-reflection and their own self-healing and their own way of being in service in the world. So that's beautiful, because it has one of the most simple and complex at the same time and deep wisdom that is carried by this planet, that we are living on.
It's an interesting question that you kind of touched on this with people who come out of Western traditions, whether they're Western religious traditions, can partake of shamanic practice and find their gift, as you put it, that they can use to add healing to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's quite a contrast in the cultures in which shamanism has arisen, or medicine traditions that are very attuned to nature, to use a more general term, and the world that we're coming out of, which is in the modern Western capitalist culture. So I'm curious what challenges you see for people from modern contexts to actually enter into the world of nature in this way and regain that connection.
Well, I think one of the, I don't know if it's exactly your question, but I think if I understood correctly, for me, what I see a lot is that it could be misused too, like any practice. If you don't change your behavior or whatever you're doing, you can still spend, 10 hours on your meditation pillow, your yoga mat, or whatever prayer practice you have. Or if you see a jerk, with your colleagues or your friends or your partners, I know people that have never done any of these practices, any of the spiritual practices, and who are beautiful people, are in service to the planet, are in service to others. And they don't really have a core spiritual practice. They don't do yoga, they don't do meditation, they don't do any shamanic work, they don't do Reiki. But they're good people. They're good human beings. They're in good relationship with each other and good relationship with the earth. And so I think that what I really see sometime happening, in the same way meditation can be taken out of its original foundation and aim and brought back into maybe a corporation that's doing a lot of evil on the planet, or in a group of people that maybe are not very aligned.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we hope that this practice, because they bring you down into your heart, ultimately are going to liberate you from those behaviors and all of that. But it can also be misused, if the ego is in the way. And it can be used just as a way of dealing with the pain on a daily basis, but not really changing profoundly who we are and how we behave. And I can go back to my work, and because I meditate, I can maybe take more pressure. I can maybe put more work hours on my work, but is it really what I'm being called to? Is it really what the planet needs, my community needs right now? That's always the question. Who is it for?
Well, so you're kind of answering the question I asked, because you're, if I drive part of the challenge of a Western person getting involved in this kind of practice, is that there's a danger of appropriation where
getting back to ownership, as you were talking about in the last hour.
It's like checking a box, or I'm going to go on the ayahuasca retreat and check that one off, and it becomes spiritual practice as entertainment, and in a way,
or ego aggrandizing.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, what I hear.
Yeah, and I've seen, and I remember a retreat. There's this one retreat out there, and I won't name it, but you have to be a member of that club, and there's a high selection process on how you can enter that club, which is basically based on your achievements as a corporate person. And it's a retreat where they fly you with private jets.
Oh my God!
Some beautiful island on the other side of the world, and where you do meditation and plant medicine and all of that, and you do there's some workshops and content there about social activism and all of that. So if you look just at the schedule, you will say, well, that's great. They're doing plant medicine and meditation, and they're talking about social activism and social justice and all of that. But it's really white privilege. And also, it's totally misaligned. Flying on private jets and all of that. It's not being a good human being on the planet today. Because the planet doesn't need more jet fuels, and it's really used as an ego-driven thing. Even the whole selection process, to me, is so misaligned about who is there, who are you bringing there. And it's really staying in your own little world, and talking to the same people and feeling good about it, by bringing all those things. So there's always a risk there. And either it's meditation, or the plant, if the intention is wrong, you're not going to arrive in a good place, in the right place. It doesn't matter if you do ayahuasca or if you go on a meditation retreat, or, whatever it is, if your intention is for self-importance, or for, like you say, check a box, I've done that, or yeah, I've done this, and I've also done that, then it's clearly not answering the question, who is it for, in a right way. It's clearly not for others. So we can put makeup on it and make it look good,
Yeah.
I think it's for others, but in truth, you very quickly, you can see that it's really misaligned here.
So how do you, as a teacher, as someone who offers both training and offers a vehicle for introducing people into this work, how do you filter for that kind of intent, and what skillful means, as it were, do you use to help people see that their intent may not be what they think it is?
Yes, I think first I warn people about taking up that path, which is the path of death and rebirth in many ways. So are you ready to really see what is to see about yourself? Are you ready to let go if something is not aligned with what maybe your higher purpose or your heart is telling you? And we might not always know. We might say yes, and in fact we are going to do no, or we might say, well, maybe I'm not ready, and in fact maybe we are. So it's hard to know when we start on that. But I think it's mainly through the way we transmit those teachings. To me, the shamanic path, like I said, is a path of direct revelation. So by definition, it doesn't need a human teacher. I'm not needed for people to experience, the wisdom of a river, a forest, or a plant. We're just, facilitating, holding a space with a certain energy and bringing people together so they can experience that revelation directly. But to me, it's always about asking about intention. I always spend a lot of time with people with me that want to do work about what is your intention here? What are you trying to achieve? And honestly, if someone calls me and says, well, I'm this big CEO, I work a lot with executives, and he tells me, well, I'm running this big company, I'm working 100-hour a week, and this and that, and I want to meditate because I want to be able to open this other company and manage my marriage that's falling apart and all of that, and I want to keep it all together as it is and don't feel that anxiety anymore or sleep better. I want them that it's probably the wrong goals here. There's nothing wrong about wanting to feel less pain and sleep better and feel less anxiety. And we can put that on the paper as a goal. But what is going to really make you happy? And when we start diving, we realize very often that a lot of things have to change in the life that we are living. And the question is, are we ready to embark on that journey? Because it's really, my teacher and plant medicine world always told me when I started to walk with him, he said, you understand it's a path of no return. What you're going to see, you won't be able to unsee. And it might be not comfortable sometimes, but there is no return. You won't be able to go back to that old life because the suffering becomes bigger once you see the truth, once you see your own stuff. When it's in the light, your own shadow, it's sometimes more painful than when you didn't really see them or grasp them fully. And so that path of shamanism really exploring depth, that soul work, as we call it. So going deep dive inside, but also, going up to transcendental experience, to experience of oneness and experience of, God or whatever we call it.
Well, thank you, and you raised a point in what you just said that I wanted to get to, and since we're in our second hour, I better do it now, and we can come back to some of the other stuff as well. But it's this that you lead awakened leadership course or offer awakened leadership courses, and so you just mentioned something along those lines, and I'm wondering if you can expand on what you mean by that, how that the folks who are attracted to that and how they might learn to clarify intention in particular.
Yes, it's interesting because there's a lot of business and a lot of study now financial studies that shows that companies that do good in general and that treat their people better, they're either being their clients or their employees, usually perform better in times of crisis, like market stock crisis and all of that. And there's a lot of study about that because the clients are more loyal, the employees are more loyal because they believe in something bigger than just their paycheck, and just the product they are selling. They believe that they're doing something good. And innately, we all have inner goodness, wherever we are, however lost we are, whatever we're doing, we have inner goodness. We definitely hold that inside of us. And everything we do, if it's aligned with that, we're going to feel quite good about ourselves. And if it's not, we're going to suffer. Any other ways that is far away from that inner goodness is going to make us suffer in some form or shapes. So the Awaken Leadership program, my idea was and is, that once we align with our inner goodness, which is aligning with our heart, and what is the deepest desire as a human being, which can take some time to discover and find out because most people don't always know. Once we act from there, when we speak from there, when we take every step we take in our life is from there, there is a joy, a happiness, a fulfillment, a sense of meaning in life that appears, that cannot appear if we're not in connection with that. And so that leadership that's from the heart, is much more powerful because of that than a leadership that's just from the head and from the ego. That's based on competition. That's based on ownership. And it's hard for traditional corporate models. I mean, now there's new corporate models like B Corp or other, models. But it's hard for traditional models to believe that competition and kind of killing your enemy, which is your competitors, and, making more profit, and paying people less sometime and making, even having more of this money is not good for the company. And especially when companies are held by shareholders, or by, investors. Very often people that comes to me are more people that run their own business and own it. So they have more latitude to change things. And very often it's because they had some kind of big breakdown personally or in their life, and they want to change really the way they do things in general, and their business is one of them. So I think the corporate world, today is changing also because even the people in the stock market, the investors, and the board that runs this company realize that when they don't do that, there's huge risk for the companies because one day the consumer might realize that, I don't want to buy these products anymore because the CEO is a jerk or because the product is done by slaves on another country, really, or by child or whatever it is. And so that's, thanks to, I guess, social media and the general, awareness that we have of things much more quickly than before, it's hard to heighten what's going on today. And big companies, it's known now when something like that happens can really literally overnight lose a lot of their value because a few customers decide to take a campaign online and say, the product was done. Here's a picture of the factory. So I don't know if always people shift for the right reason, but there's definitely a movement that we cannot stop, towards that because that's who we are. At the end of the day, that's where we're aiming. I don't know if it's in 10 years or in 1,000 years, but that's where the place of equilibrium between each other and with our environment is going to be. If we don't do that, we're on a closed system. We're going to run out of resources anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the corporate world and the existence of corporations seem like another form of life. Another self-organizing system that includes people and materials and things like that. And the early stages of that it's still a very primitive kind of life. And
totally.
The interesting opportunity, as you describe, is if somehow the people engaged in that world can bring a higher purpose and the covenant under which that corporation exists, and you mentioned a couple of modern variations from the standard corporation, can actually become more commonplace. It might be possible for this this odd form of life to evolve and effect to good purposes changes that are needed in this planet.
Yeah, and to do it for the right reason. What's called corporate social responsibility, CSR programs, were born 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they work for a little while, and companies were doing that mainly to kind of, rob a little bit the back of their customer to say, we're doing good, look, we have a foundation and we're opening some orphanage, or we're doing this, we're recycling and all of that. But if the core of your mission is misaligned, and you have the whole CSR program, that's not going to work. End of the day, it's just the way it is. Because at some point, your employees are going to realize it, which means your customers are going to know about it at some point, and you are at risk. So you need really to reflect on that. And yes, if you're a CEO and you're only here for 3 years and you're paid, a lot of money every year, you might not care because you might just here for a few years and take as much money as you want in that process.
Right.
But you might care because you have children and you realize, wow, I need to care. It's important.
You're listening to the Sanctuary Podcast with Angel Deere. While you're listening, browse the website at www.thesanctuaryheal.com.
Got it. Well, I want to touch on as many points as I can while we've still got you here today. So I wanted to invite you to speak about trauma. That's one of the things you touched on briefly in the first hour. And in one of the emails you shared with us, you talked specifically about emotional, physical, and sexual trauma. So how does the work you do, the shamanic, etc., these modalities that you use, how are you able to help people, presumably help to heal their own traumas that they're carrying with them?
Well, trauma is something that we hold as a collective, as countries sometimes.
That's for sure today.
As collective, sometimes as religion, sometimes as groups, as families, as communities, as gender.
Right.
So there's many, many layers to it, and it's quite complex things, but there's nobody that's really immune to it. And it doesn't have to be something that has been dramatic, like being sexually abused or something really big that you remember, but, repeated small emotional trauma every day, especially in your childhood, it's been proven now to create massive damage on, brain developments and capacity to have empathy and capacity to connect to others and capacity to be in proper relationship with others as adults. And, the statistics, especially in the U.S., are quite dramatic. 75% of children in the U.S. Carry some form of trauma today, young children. And when we look at, that trauma, very often it's emotional, but, in 30% of the case it's physical, and very often also it's sexual. And so the reality of it is that when we carry trauma in our body, because that's where trauma is located, in our nervous system, in our tissues. When we carry that trauma, the body is amazingly well designed because it's evolved for millions of years. And the body is capable of hiding it and not making us feel it. So we can function. It's a good system. It's designed so even if we go through something atrocious, somehow we don't always throw ourselves by the window. That can happen, but very often we just survive the trauma. We might be kind of functioning, a seemingly normal life, but in fact, many things in our behaviors are not normal behaviors, they are trauma behaviors. Incapacity to have deep emotional intimacy with people, incapacity to feel empathy, many things like that. So our capacity to connect basically to the world is very limited because our nervous system is in a response place where it cannot connect. It's not open. And it has to do with the vagus nerve. And, we're not going into detail that, but there's a lot of study now on what happened in our nervous system. When we approach trauma with shamanism, it's a very different way than the traditional psychotherapy or trauma work that's out there, but it's very similar, just with different vocabulary and tools. But the way when we work with plant medicine, for example, with trauma, is that we rely on the belief that you have inner goodness and inner wisdom. And we rely on the belief and the proven reality that nature, because it's the oldest teacher, it's a multiple billion-year-old teacher, if you take the earth, has learned and seen so much that it carries wisdom that we can connect to as being part of nature, as human beings. And so when we bring people into those experiences, or we have people experience some shamanic work, doesn't have to be with plants, we rely and we trust that the capacity of your body and the capacity of nature brought together to a certain set of practices and rituals can bring healing, because it's been proven for tens of thousands of years. Those methods, have evolved. It's not like they are old and just folkloric methods. They have evolved and been refined and refined and refined. And so the way the medicine people works today is based on a lineage, sometime, of thousands of years of so many teachers. And so they've proven to work. And I've seen them, to come back to trauma, working amazingly well with people with trauma. Sometimes people carrying things that they have not been able to get rid of through traditional methods, or very often just medication, which very rarely heal the trauma. It can, help cope with it. It can get us go through a bit of bad moments, but it doesn't really heal it in depth. It can allow the body to finally reopen, can allow the nervous system to re-engage, and can help people to be relating with themselves and others in such a different way. Sometimes 30 years after trauma happened, after just, a few nights or a few days of work, just because the body knows how to heal. That's how cancer heals in some people. That's how some people get out of depression. It's not that they are smarter. It means they just connected that wisdom in their body. So that's what we access in shamanic work. We're accessing the deepest nature of the being, of each other. And we trust and we know, because we know that it's present in the core of your being. It's in your DNA, it's in your bones, it's in your breath. There is the wisdom. We just need to be able to reconnect to it and to be, supported or guided into it. But really, it's you are your own healer in that process anyway. You just have support from plants, from medicine.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier the idea of the co-creation, and
yeah.
It's certainly been our experience when we've spoken to practitioners on a shamanic or a medicine healing path that it's important to have agreement from the people that you're working with.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like that's an important part of this process that you're describing, that someone has to be in agreement, and it's not a context where they're being fixed, that you're not the fixer, right?
Yes, exactly. Those 2 points are the most important, and I'm glad you mentioned it. The agreement is key. There's no work if there's no agreement, period. So I'm not going to send healing to someone unless that person have asked for it. I've offered it, and they said yes. Because that's the difference between shamanism and, let's say, sorcery or
right.
all the type of craft out there where I intervene in your space to do something that you haven't asked for or you're not willing to receive. And to me, that's very black and white. There is no maybe. It's a yes or it's a no. So that's very important. And when we deal with trauma, it's even more important, because very often people were in a position where what they were asking for didn't happen. This is stop, and it didn't happen, for example. So for the nervous system to heal, it needs to trust. It needs to trust you to voice, first, what you want, and 2, that the person in front of you is going to do exactly what you ask for. So then you can work with the body, the person, or the conscious mind of the body of that person, and the healer. It's like the 3 points that are working together in alignment. So that's really the most important, and the foundation in that work. And we never do work outside of that. I'm always surprised by people that post something in there, I'm going through something, send me healing, just on their Facebook friends.
Right.
But you allow basically hundreds of people that probably don't know at all to send energy your way. And what we do, we don't do that. We want to know who we sit with, who we are with. We want to be connected. Not that most people have bad intention, but it's just self-respect for knowing that not only your physical body is your property and, it's your ownership and your boundary needs to be very clear, but also your energetic body, your emotions and everything that flows in and out of it. You're the safeguard of it. And so it's always important to know what you're asking for and who you allow in that space.
Yeah, I think that sometimes when people do that they don't really believe it. It's more like it's more like a statement. I just want to feel better.
Yeah. Or to be heard or seen, whatever is going on at that time, which is, in fact, not wrong. There's suffering there, and we need to acknowledge that, but it might be a different way to heal.
Yeah. One question I wanted to ask that's related to this work with trauma and particularly with nature. We've had a friend on the show a couple of times that is involved in the work called forest bathing, where people go into natural settings very slowly and very deliberately, and
they linger and let themselves experience nature.
Right. So it's a very, very interesting practice, and there's been a lot of...
It's a Japanese practice, no? Is it Japanese?
Yeah.
Although becoming much bigger here in the U.S.
So, but one of the things that this guy who's one of the major practitioners of this in the U.S. and trainers in the U.S. Described was that when people interact with trees, like part of this practice, people will go, there'll be a group going together, but then sometimes people for certain periods of time will go off by themselves. And one of the things they can do is like work with a tree. And that there seems to be a very strong connection with getting people in touch with their grief and with trees. And I'm just bringing that up because it was an interesting way in this particular model that is described where nature and the energy of nature is working with us to show us something deeply within ourselves, and it's a very specific kind of interaction. And I'm interested if that resonates with the work that you do, if you find that natural forces can ally with us to facilitate this healing process that you're describing.
Yes, they have a capacity of holding that's way beyond, and wherever we are, we know that when we watch the sunset or beautiful, stars at night, or we walk in a forest, that feeling is profound and relaxing and peaceful and ease the nervous system, and, it might make us, having thoughts and different feeling and maybe crying and grief coming out and pain and emotions and, that's, we just have tears, we are moved and we are held. Because we're part of it, and there is also this belief, and that's something, I see a lot with people that I work with, that we are grieving our separation with nature. We are grieving, all the damage we've been doing to what we call our mother, where we're born from, the one that's nourishing us, that's giving us our food, our waters, our air that we breathe, and it's like our mother, she takes care of us every day. And we're grieving that disconnection, and without knowing, that creates so much pain, and that creates, anger and many, many trauma that we have and we carry as a group because we have been away from that home.
I want to add to what you've just said, which I'm in profound agreement with. The way in which people's interaction with electronic devices today is leading attention away from interaction with, appreciation for, engagement with nature, and it's not that I'm saying you should be a Luddite and abstain from computers and phones and stuff, but there's also a way in which, as you're just saying, it seems to me nature heals, and yet there's a lot of tendency towards a sort of compulsive relationship with these devices, and a little or no relationship with the natural world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if your work engages with that, with people.
It's always part of it. The sanctuary, so the healing center here is in the middle of a nature reserve, and in the middle of the forest, and there is, deers and bears and eagles and, all kind of other animals and things around, because people very often arrive there and after they might come for a retreat for a weekend or just for a few hours, but after 10, 30 minutes they say, wow, I'm feeling so good, I'm feeling relaxed already just by being here.
Yeah.
And I know that. It's what's going to help them the most at the end of the day, that reconnection. Because then really the beauty of it, if you become silent enough, if you sit there with, it doesn't have to be a vision quest for 5 days in the woods, but it could be just 30 minutes sitting along a river or, even in a park, in the city. Some thoughts, some things arise from you that needs to be witnessed and needs to be seen. That's when your wisdom starts speaking. Because there's a reflection, it's like a mirror. Nature is a mirror. And reflecting back to you. And you think something and say, oh, it's funny, I was looking at that sunset, or I was looking at that river, and I thought about my mother and about my relationship with her. That's shamanic work. It's being able to silence our mind enough by slowing down, mainly. We just slow down. We just listen. By hearing that, and those things happen, and the healing that those words, those thoughts, those emotions carry are very profound always. It's always from higher wisdom, higher consciousness inside of us. And it's literally nature speaking to us. And we can develop those skills or remember them because we have them. It's like we just forgot them. Kids know that. They just know how to talk to trees, just forgot about it. We can very easily learn that language again. It's like, it's not French, it's not English, it's nature language, so it speaks differently, but it's a language we know because we're part of it. We're born with it. So it's something that anybody can do, and anybody can tap into that.
Well, in this conversation, we're getting towards the end here, and we like to make room for our guests to tell people, number one, how to get in contact, etc., but also current projects, any upcoming events, new initiatives, etc. So you are invited to do any and all of the above.
No, thank you for that. Well, the best way to get in touch is to go on the website of the Sanctuary, and the website is thesanctuaryheal.com, thesanctuaryheal.com. And we have a whole schedule of workshops, retreats, events that are coming up in the next few months, and I think we have even something starting in January next year. So we have a year-long program, training in shamanism, that starts in January every year and in September. That are done remotely, so people don't have to come here. There's a little bit part that's here, but we have students from literally all over the world that join that program. And then we have smaller format retreats and workshops, which could be over a weekend or a few weeks. And some of them are in Peru, because Peru is kind of my second home now, and we do a lot of plant medicine work over there. And so we have 2 retreats a year, in May and in November. In Peru, where we bring, a group of people there. And then, like I said, there's plenty of other work around trauma, a lot around trauma, but around healing in general and reconnection with ourselves, either a day program or week program. And for people that can't travel or, even don't have the means to attend retreats, we have a lot of free content. We have a podcast and also a big blog with a lot of the subjects that we talked about today where I go in depth to certain aspect of it. So people can just find all of that on the sanctuaryheal.com website.
That's great. Well, we very much appreciate you taking the time to join us on this show, and I kind of feel like we just scratched the surface of your work, so I'm looking forward to future conversations where we can go a little deeper in some of the very interesting stuff that you're dealing with now.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope the people who listen at least, will just go for that voice and go for that inner wisdom and find some time in nature. At least if we have achieved that, if some people say, oh, you know what, I'm going to spend an hour more a week in nature and sit with it, that would be great.
That would be fantastic. Well, thank you for taking time to be with us here on The Mystical Positivist. We really do appreciate it, and I had a good time talking with you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Mystical Positivist. This is your host, Stuart Goodnick. This week on the show, co-host Rob Schmidt and I have been speaking by telephone with Shawinigan Ungaya, a.k.a. Guillaume Gauthier, founder and director of the Sanctuary Healing Center in the Catskill Mountains, where he offers various forms of healing modalities, including shamanic, energy, and sound healing, plus plant and herb therapies, as well as Awakened Leadership course. Next week's show on The Mystical Positivist is yet to be determined. It may be a rerun, it may be live, but that show will be airing on Saturday, March 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m. Upcoming on the spiritual calendar in Sonoma County, Follow Your Dread to the Mystical Heart. With the Tayu Meditation Center staff, our monthly first Wednesday meeting at 7:30 p.m. will be April 3rd, 2019 at Many Rivers Books and Tea, 130 South Main Street in Sebastopol. Story has it that in the very bottom fissure of hell, the deepest recess glowing with unquenchable fires, a simple drain cover lies unnoticed. Find and remove the cover, descend through the narrow drain, and emerge into the highest, most radiant realm of heaven. If this metaphor resonates with something in you, our practice group that focuses upon Follow Your Dread may resonate still more deeply. No one can be divorced from or denied access to the mystical heart. But to open and then live within the mystical heart of the world and ourselves has a cost. We don't get there by denying, sweeping under the rug, or putting aside the aspects that we dislike of who we have been. The mystical heart receives the light and the dark without judgment. So in our group and individual practice, we seek to cultivate a heart-mind that holds all contents of consciousness simultaneously with discernment and without discrimination. Following Your Dread is an undertaking best accomplished in the company of fellow travelers and with guidance from those who have gone before. Join us once a month at Many Rivers in downtown Sebastopol to learn more about the realistic path to the mystical heart.
On the Thursdays at Many Rivers event in Sebastopol this coming week, Wu Wei and Taoist Formal Practice. That's with Wu Ming Chuan, also known as Jacob Newell, local Taoist priest and author of These Taoist Bones. That's on Thursday, March 21st, 7:30 p.m., Many Rivers Books and Tea, 130 South Main Street in Sebastopol. Jacob will share some of his basic ideas of a path called Wu Wei Dao. This path emerged in the Yellow River region of pre-Han China during the Warring States period, which would have been like 2,500 years ago, when an unnamed group of cultivators got together to write a text known as the Tao Te Ching. This text was picked up 500 years later and became a central inspiration for the Taoist religion. Wu Wei Dao roughly translates as, quote, the way of non-struggling, unquote, and has been practiced both within and without the Taoist religion for millennia. Jacob will discuss the role of formal practices such as sitting meditation, chanting, and Taiji Quan, as well as opportunities to abide in effortless naturalness, not burdensome practices that we must undertake to improve a flawed nature. Jacob Newell has 25 years' experience with Buddhist and Taoist meditation and Qi cultivation. He lives in Santa Rosa and is an ordained Taoist priest. He's the author of These Taoist Bones, a book of contemplative poetry. He writes the blog, Taoist Blog of Nameless Stream, and runs Old Oak School of Tao.
Thank you for joining us once again for the Mystical Positivist. Podcasts of all our shows can be found at www.mysticalpositivist.blogspot.com, as well as commentary and discussion of topics of interest to the show. Also, please send comments and feedback to mysticalpositivist@gmail.com, and join us again next Saturday.
We leave you with music from a CD called The Lute in Dance and Dream, masterpieces for lute from the 16th to 18th centuries, performed by Lutz Kirchhoff on Renaissance and Baroque lutes. This piece by Paul Charles Durand is called Carillon. Enjoy.
You've been listening to the Sanctuary Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, we're a source of talks about spirituality, personal transformation, energy healing, shamanism, and earth-based practices. For more, visit thesanctuaryheal.com. On the website, you can find out about our events, our retreats, healing offering, our spiritual blog, and you can also register for the newsletter. Again, visit thesanctuaryheal.com. Till next time, this is the Sanctuary Podcast, and Angel Deere signing off.